Years ago, we did a show with Jody Olson from Canby. In addition to doing a great job on that show, Jody also gave me the names of several other people and topics in the area that would make interesting shows. Well, Jody is a master gardener and knows her stuff when it comes to plants. I'm Mary Holm, host of Prairie Yard Garden, and let's go visit with one of the names on Jody's list to learn about growing apricots, fruits, and a whole lot more.
Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided by Heartland Motor Company, providing service to Minnesota and the Dakotas for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. North Dakota State University, through its Field to Fork educational program, providing research-based information on growing, preparing, and preserving fruits and vegetables. Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. And by Friends of Prairie Yard and Garden, a community of supporters like you who engage in the long-term growth of the series. To become a friend of Prairie Yard and Garden, visit pioneer.org/PYG.
Growing up, I spent many days out in the fields baling hay or harvesting grain. To come home all sweaty and hungry, it was such a treat to have fresh fruit like apricots that were always in season at harvest time. When Jody suggested visiting Al Precht because he loves to grow apricots right here in Minnesota, it took me right back to those delicious fruits Mom had bought. I called Al and he said we could come to see his apricots and other fruits too. Thanks, Al, for letting us come.
Well, you're very welcome.
Now, what is your background?
Well, I started out of high school in Navy. I joined the Navy right after I got out of high school, and that was my first experience with apricots, actually. I was stationed in Vallejo, California. It's up by San Francisco, and I was going to school there, and I had to live somewhere in California. We found a place in Napa, California, wine country. So one weekend we were bored and wanted to see what this area was all about. We started just touring around the Napa area, and as we were out there looking around, I saw a fruit tree off in the distance, and it had some fruit on it, and I thought I better go check this out. And it happened to be an apricot, and it was ripe. So I tasted, and I went, oh my God, I might have to grow some of these. The only experience I had with apricots before that was my mother had brought some home from the store, and they tasted terrible. And I thought, no, I don't like apricots. After that day, I like apricots.
Well, how did you end up in this location?
When I got out of the Navy, I was looking for a place to live. My good friend actually drove out to San Diego to pick me up after I was discharged. And we drove back, and he says, there's a place out in the country, I always go hunting. And nobody had lived here for years. So he knew the guy that owned it, of course, because he was hunting here all the time. And so we moved out here. And it was overgrown tall grass like the CRP up right by the house. That was the spring of '77 when I moved here.
How did you get started growing apricots here?
Well, I didn't go into it immediately. It was probably 6-7 years after I was here, or maybe even more. I'm not even sure. But I happened to have the Gurney's catalog out, and on the back page was a 2-for-1 offer on apricots. Yeah, I think I'll order that. So I did. And that was my first experience with growing apricots here. I had 2 trees of apricots from Gurney's, and they turned out to be totally different trees. The one in my center turnaround, the apricots were inedible. They'd get a little yellow, and they were hard, they stayed hard, and when they did fall off, they were cracked and yellow, and they had no taste at all. Well, yeah, they had a bad taste. And the other one had a beautiful football-shaped apricot, and it tastes like Tang orange juice. It was just excellent. I think it was in late 80s. I grabbed a bunch of seeds from the good tree that I liked, and I went like that in my garden. And the next spring I had apricots coming up all over in my garden. They took 6 or 7 years before they bloomed from seed. And I was tempted to pull them out of my garden because I wanted my garden back. I had to keep tilling around them. I actually had the tractor over there and the chain drug out. I was ready to pull them out that fall. They hadn't bloomed, I hadn't done anything. That's time to get my garden back. And then as I thought about it while I'm getting this all ready, I said, why don't I just wait till next spring and see if they bloom? And they did. So it was that close to even just pulling them all out.
So did you do anything different to get them to bloom?
No, I just waited. But it was Mother Nature, you know, doing what she does. And it just takes a while for them to mature enough to bloom. And they did. And the fruit I tasted on that first apricot was just excellent. I thought, oh my God, I almost pulled these out. So they stayed. And it turned out I had way too many trees in my garden. But I gave a bunch of them away. And 2 of them that I gave away I did name because my landlord ended up with those 2 in front of his house, and they were both good. So I got a graft of those and moved them back here on a grafted tree. But that's where it kind of started. And the ones that I left in my yard, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of them that I named because they were good enough fruit to name. The ones that weren't good enough to name, I didn't name them. Once those trees proved themselves to be good apricots to eat, then I took pieces of those trees and grafted them onto Manchurian apricot rootstock and planted them out here. And once they got about this big, then I cut them off and grafted my good varieties on each of those right here, and that's what we have here now. From then on, I've been grafting ever since.
Now, do you fertilize your trees too?
No.
Okay. Do you have to worry about a late spring frost disturbing your... Okay. Okay. So that can wreck your harvest.
Well, yeah. Apricots in Minnesota are not a dependable crop. They are subject to hard winters where the flower buds actually freeze and die, and they just fall off in the spring. They won't bloom. The tree itself is extremely hardy. I have never had a tree die from deep, hard winters, but the flower buds do.
How do you know when the apricots are ripe and ready to eat?
When they fall on the ground. That's the first ones I taste.
Okay. And then how do you harvest all of these?
A lot of people come out and they grab all they can and they go make wine and they make jelly and they make jam and preserves, whatever they make. It's whatever they can get.
Then do you have to do anything special in the fall to take care of your trees?
No. One thing I like to do is harvest a few seeds. They're really good to eat. It's just like any other nut. You crack the nut open and there's a seed in it, it's just like an almond.
Now, you grow more than just apricots, right?
Right. Apples. That's what I started out planting before I ever got any apricots. Apples and pears, raspberries.
Well, can we go see some of those too?
Yes, we can.
If you've ever planted summer squash or zucchini, you may be amazed at how fast it grows. You can almost watch it grow. There is a national holiday, tongue-in-cheek, National Leave Zucchini on Your Neighbor's Doorstep. Now, zucchini is a little different from winter squash. It has a thinner skin and it has a higher moisture content. It's also much lower in calories than a typical winter squash. It does contain vitamin C, but not as much carotenoids, which make vitamin A in our body. Zucchini's superpower is versatility. Try it in different ways. Try making zucchini boats. Simply slice them lengthwise, scoop out some of the center, and roast them. Flip them over, fill them with taco meat or stuffing or pasta sauce, and bake. In meat dishes, you can add grated zucchini to meatloaf or meatballs. You can also steam slices in the microwave or saute them with garlic on the stovetop. There are spiralizer tools available, or you can simply use a vegetable peeler to make zucchini noodles. And if you have an air fryer, try making crunchy snacks by air frying zucchini chips. If you want to trim back on your summer squash production, the blossoms are edible. They have a mild flavor. You can float them in soups. You can use them in salads. And as a bonus, they won't produce another summer squash if you have too many. I'm Dr. Julie, bringing the feel to your fork. Until next time.
This is my favorite apple, Empire. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Well, I ordered these shortly after I moved here, maybe 5 years after I moved here. I used to have a lot of apple trees in here, but this one has really done well. It produces every year. It's not one of those that produces every other year, like a lot of apples do. But it always has a crop. It ripens around September. It's a red apple, and it's just excellent flavor and crispy, really crispy. So that is my favorite apple.
Okay, what are some of the other varieties that you have?
I have Wolf River. It's an 1800s variety, huge apple. I've got Golden Delicious, and I've got one that I named Q. It was supposed to be Northwest Greening, and it was marked Northwest Greening, but it is not a Northwest Greening. I have no idea what it is, so I named it Q for question.
Okay.
But it is another excellent apple. It's my second favorite apple. And then I have a few apples I've grafted on to my Wolf River, and I'm getting ready to graft onto another apple I have over here. I just pruned off some of the big branches this spring, and now they've got new growth. That's where I'll graft onto next spring.
So is the spring the best time to do your grafting?
The grafting I do, yes. It has to be done in the spring, but there is a different type of graft you can do in August. I'm just not good at doing that one. It's a bud graft, they call it. I don't know how to do that one very well, so I just stick to my spring grafting.
Do these trees, do you need to have a pollinator tree blooming at about the same time to get a good crop?
Yeah, I think so. But I have enough trees here blooming all the time, so I don't worry about it. The pears are a different story. They definitely need a pollinator, the one I have.
Well, these trees are out in the open. Do you have trouble with critters?
Yeah, the deer. And even the rabbits. I've got a fairly good sized tree that had a trunk like that. The rabbits girdled the trunk one year, and mice.
What do you do to prevent the damage?
Well, in the fall of every year, I wrap with tin foil. That's my wrap for protecting the trees, but the mice just chew the tin foil. I didn't realize they would do that, but they did. But the rabbits won't bother them. Take a long sheet and start at the base and spiral it up the tree, and then I squeeze it. And it stays on by itself easy.
Okay. How about the deer? Because they can stand on their hind legs.
They'll chew on anything that's handy. They're browsers, they're whatever's handy. Oh, I'll eat that. You just deal with a little loss here and there. And that's the trouble with my apricots too. So they won't ever get any more than this tall unless you protect them from the deer in the summertime. In the summertime, the rabbits don't bother. So I don't have to worry about them in the summer, but wintertime, definitely. Okay. I just started some new seedlings 3 years ago in the spring from seed. And I put First I put a 3-foot fence around the whole works, the whole row. And then I even put a higher fence. So I got 6 feet of chicken wire fence around those new apricots so the deer cannot mess me up again. I started over so many times you can't believe it.
Well, do you have any trouble with insect or disease issues?
Not on the apricots. The apples, I get a few worms in the apples, but I just eat around them. I'm organic, so I don't spray.
What do you do with all your harvest?
I eat all I can. Okay. And I give away the rest.
Okay.
Yep.
Al, do you have other fruits too?
I sure do. I got pear trees, I want to show you them. And I have plums, raspberries. The raspberries just got done. It's too bad you didn't get to taste them, but they're really good too. But the pear, that's pretty interesting. This is Waterville pear, right there, and it took many, many years before I ever got a crop. They just don't bloom early in their life, I guess. That's what I was told. Pears are very fickle about blooming in the early stages of their lives. So I waited probably 20 years since I planted this thing before I ever got a bloom. And then I didn't have a pollinator. So I asked Jody Olson if she would let me have a piece of her pear tree, and I grafted it on this one. And it finally bloomed this year, but I hadn't had a bloom before. And this one finally gave me a full tree of blossoms this year, and I had no pollinator. I didn't think I would have Jody's tree either blooming, but so I asked a friend of mine in Canby if I could borrow some of his branches, and he says, sure, take all you want. And then I got 4 or 5 branches from his trees, put them in a 5-gallon bucket down at the base of this tree, and walked away. And the pear finally got done blooming. Even the blossoms in the bucket were still blooming. But I noticed all of a sudden I've got pears setting on the whole tree. And this side of the tree where the bucket sits, I had the most pears. The opposite side had a few, and the top, none. So it worked, just using branches from another tree, setting it underneath the tree in a 5-gallon bucket full of water.
So what was Jody's?
Jody's is luscious. And I did bloom a few days later than this, but it was, you know, I think it even helped pollinate a few. So we got some pollination, finally, and a crop.
Do you notice a difference between the luscious and the Waterville?
Well, hers is light green, and mine, as you can see, has a darker green and red on it. So they're totally different pears, very obvious it's a different pear, but it's just my grafting.
Wow, that's just wonderful. Do you have plants to encourage pollinators to come and fertilize all of your fruits?
I don't plant anything specifically, but we didn't have hardly any bees this spring either. I think maybe just flies or whatever insects landed on those flowers, it worked.
It looks like you have a lot of prairie plants here though too.
Well, this is my asparagus plot, and I put this in really early when I first moved here. Maybe the 3rd or 4th year after I moved here, I put this asparagus patch in. It's dwindled down to very few asparagus plants, but you can see them. And I get a good harvest every year. I never worry about having asparagus. And we eat asparagus every day. So since it is dwindling, I did plant a new asparagus plot this spring, 44 more plants, so we'll have lots.
Well, you have all these fruits. Do you do vegetables too?
Oh, everything you can imagine.
Can we see that?
Yes, whenever you want to.
I have a question. I've heard some parts of the upper Midwest are now in Zone 5. What kind of plants can I now try?
Yeah, so there are some parts of the upper Midwest that are in USDA hardiness zone 5 now, which means that basically our winters have gotten a bit warmer and our growing seasons have gotten a bit longer. In fact, here we are, just bordering the Twin Cities here at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum. And the Arboretum happens to be right on that border between Zone 5 in the Twin Cities and where it's Zone 4 farther west of the metro. So we are starting to experiment with some Zone 5 plants here at the Arboretum. Some that you could try at home would be the pawpaw, which is a Native American fruit, the persimmon, which we're trying here a little bit. There's a Catalpa purpurea tree that you could give a shot. Catalpas are really nice shade trees that provide a lot of dense shade. So that's a nice option to try. An ornamental plant for dry shaded gardens is an epimedium, which is an Asian plant that is considered Zone 5 that you could try here. I do just want to say that anything that we try for Zone 5 while we're in this marginal Zone 5 zone, you should really approach it as experimental. Maybe it would survive the first few winters, but if we do get a really classic Minnesota, North Dakota winter that's really cold, it could die. And so when we say Zone 5, we don't mean that we flipped a switch and all of a sudden we can grow hardier plants. We're gonna try them out, see what works, see what doesn't. Another thing that I wanna point out is I tried blackberries, primocane blackberries in my backyard that were rated as Zone 5. I wanted to see if they would survive. Here's the kicker. Yes, they survived the winter, but they didn't produce fruit by the time we got a frost in October. Sometimes a Zone 5 plant, a warmer climate plant, means that it takes a longer season to actually develop the fruit or the crop that you're trying to grow. So maybe even if it survives there, if your goal is to get fruit off of it, you might not, because our season's still just not quite long enough. You know, gardening's all about experimentation, so go ahead, try something new. Just keep in mind that, don't get too disappointed if something doesn't go quite the way you want it to right away. We're all just having fun.
Well, this is my coal crop area this year. I move it all around. But this year's, I harvested 6 beautiful white heads of cauliflower. And these coming later this year, must be the rain or something, they are not doing very well. They don't produce a nice looking head. But my purple cauliflower are doing well, and my purple cabbage are just awesome.
Why do you like the purple?
The flavor, it's unbelievable. I put them in a refrigerator. I was eating cabbage this spring from last year's crop. They stored in my refrigerator all year long, and the flavor is just excellent. So I make sure I grow the purple cabbage every year.
How did you put them, or how did you keep them in the fridge? Did you wrap them in anything, or what?
I go to the grocery store and get groceries, and I get a plastic bag. I use those bags to put the head in. And they sit in the refrigerator just fine all winter.
Wow.
Once in a while you got to clean off a couple of outside leaves when they start rotting, but big deal.
This is just beautiful. What variety is this?
Graffiti it's called.
Wow.
Purple cauliflower. And it tastes about the same as the white.
Okay.
So.
Well then, do you grow tomatoes too?
Oh yes, I always grow. That's my favorite food. I can live on those things. When I was working as a dozer operator, I would take an ice cream bucket full of tomatoes, and they'd be gone by noon. I'd eat them all myself. So I love tomatoes. I will never be without those.
So what are the varieties that you like to grow?
I grow Better Boy, that's my favorite, and Lemon Boy. Those are the two I've stuck with now for years. Years ago I did a test. I grew like a dozen different varieties, and I peeled them all and laid them on a plate, and I had the name on there, and then I judged them on a scale of 1 to 10, which ones were the best, and the Better Boy and the Lemon Boy were 10s, definitely a 10. And I did grow a German Head is the name of the tomato. It's an old heirloom variety. They are really excellent as well, but you don't get a lot of tomatoes on the plant, so it's not worth it when I got Better Boy and Lemon Boy. So
how do you keep yours upright so that they're not tipping out all over the place?
Well, I didn't for a lot of years, and just maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I came up with a plan to fix that situation. I had some old fencing. When I was a dozer operator, I buried a lot of trees and groves and stuff, and I'd find these rolls of fence wire, and they said, put them in the hole and bury it. And I took a bunch of them home. Well, I had this 32-inch wide fencing that was just the perfect width. And so I built cages. What I do is I build my first layer of fencing with 2x2 posts, sharpen the end and pound them in the ground. And then I run a string line between the two ends of the posts of the row. And I put another post probably around every 8 feet. I put a post. And I put it right along the string so they're in line. And then I measure over 30 inches. I got a 32-inch fence. I measure 30 inches over. And then I take my 32-inch fencing and I roll it. Oh, I put in 1x4s along those posts at about 2 feet. And then I roll the fencing out on that. And so it's got an inch over on each side, and it sits on there just nicely. There's hardly any work to it other than screwing the fencing together, the posting system together.
So then what do you do in the fall when you take everything down?
Well, I save all the screws, put them in a bucket, and use them the next year when I move my crop to a different spot. So I rebuild it every year. And I have a lot of varying lengths of fencing, so I can always get it to fit whatever length of row I have, and it works perfect.
So you do rotate your crops around
Yes,
the
I do.
garden? Okay.
Yes, I do.
And why is that important?
Well, diseases. You got to try to avoid the diseases as much as possible, but sooner or later, it'll get you anyway.
Well, this has been so interesting, and I'm so grateful that you let us come out and see all of your fruits and vegetables.
Anytime. And we'll let you taste them too, and anything that's ready to eat.
Sounds like a great idea to me.
Yes.
Funding for Prairie Yard Garden is provided by Heartland Motor Company, providing service to Minnesota and the Dakotas for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. North Dakota State University, through its Field to Fork educational program, providing research-based information on growing, preparing, and preserving fruits and vegetables. Mark and Margaret Yackel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. And by Friends of Prairie Yard Garden, a community of supporters like you who engage in the long-term growth of the series. To become a friend of Prairie Yard Garden, visit pioneer.org/PYG.